Okay, we might get going. Thank you all for attending the session on managing cyber risk during disruption. I'm Tim Andrew, one of RIMS Australasia's directors. I want to thank specifically the Risk and Insurance Management Society for supporting RIMS Australasia in hosting these sessions over the next few days. In particular, I also want to thank Lynette Schultes of FM Global and her team for sponsoring the session on cyber risk and allowing us to engage with two of the staff from the region, Pankaj Tharaja and Christian Walsh. It would be remiss of RIMS Australasia to not acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this session. On behalf of RIMS, we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. The RIMS Australasia Summit has been approved for CPD points by ANZIIF and NIBA, 1 point per hour per session. Attendees will be emailed attendance certificates post the event for their records. Now to some housekeeping. Can I please remind attendees that all cameras and microphones are to be turned off and kindly ensure they stay off to avoid any disruption during FM's presentation. We'll be using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to ask questions. Please type your question, but also upvote any other attendee questions that you would like to see answered. The chat function has been disabled to ensure all questions are captured in the Q&A function. Please note that these sessions will be recorded and distributed post-summit via the RIMS Australasia website. So just note they'll be there for basically all time. So our presenters today are Pankaj Tharaja, by way of introduction, a cyber consultant for the APAC division of FM Global in Singapore. Pankaj has 19 plus years of technology and cyber experience, as well as work within FM Global's scientific research and loss prevention arm. He is a certified information security professional. With Pankaj, we have Christian Walsh, one of FM's senior account engineers. Christian is the cyber go-to person in Australia for FM and is part of the regional team dealing with cyber issues. So we'll put you in FM's hands now to run the session and deal with Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for the introduction, and greetings, everyone. Hope you're all keeping safe in these interesting times. I would like to thank you all for taking the time to attend today's session. Hope it will be time well spent for you. So let's begin. Well, in this digital era, cybercrime is certainly on rise, as you might have seen in the news headlines. It's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing and we will continue to face as our digital dependency grows. These criminals are even taking the advantage of current situation, the COVID-19, for their malicious gains, as our dependency on technology has risen even more. With the rising cyber threats, we have no other choice but to build a resilient business and manage the risk well. In the presentation today, what we will cover is basically the impact of cyber attack on a business, the importance of the cyber risk assessment and how it can help identify gaps in a security program so you can mitigate such gaps to build a resilient business and prevent losses. Considering we have risk managers on call today, we promise that we'll keep it simple and not use jargons as much as possible. But before we even begin, let me ask you a question. Jess, can we have the polling question, please? All right, so the question is, what do you think will be the annual cost of cybercrime damages to the world by 2021? And the choices are in front of you. All right, so I guess we have the responses. Can we just lock in? Okay, so you see the results. I think it's a mixed response. Some said 60 billion, the other said 600 billion, and the others 22% said 6 trillion. Well, the correct answer is $6 trillion. And let me move on to the next slide. The correct answer is $6 trillion, and it's based on a study done by Cybersecurity Ventures. The cost basically include the business disruption, lost productivity, ransom money, restoration of data and systems. But what's at the risk? Well, data, of course, and that's often what we first think of: cyber theft of data, destruction and disruption of data. But it doesn't stop there, because there is a means to profit not just from the data itself, but the interruption to the business networks upon which your daily operations depend. And why stop there? Hackers would typically disrupt everything and anything they can, including your manufacturing plants, in case you were in a business of manufacturing, power gen, mining, etc. Why? See, if the entire business was disrupted, and not just data, it builds up a huge pressure on a business to pay ransom. And in certain cases, such attacks can even go beyond disrupting a business to damaging physical equipment, really depending on the intent of a hacker. For example, hacker creating an overpressure event for damaging the environment, which can be devastating. As an insurer, we are seeing cyber losses each year. Though these losses are unique in their own way, but there is still a pattern: the way these criminals attempt to penetrate and disrupt the business operations. Let me walk you through a cyber attack and its impact on the business in this section. Michelle, who works for a finance, notices an unexpected invoice in her emails. And she was pretty curious to know why this email or the invoice is sent to her, and then unintentionally or intentionally downloads out of curiosity the invoice and infects her laptop with a malware. The first thing hackers usually do to hack in an environment is to steal administrative credentials. Why do they do that? Pretty honestly, the moment you have the highest credentials in the environment, you can easily deploy malware in that environment. In this case, the entire business was shut down in 90 minutes. 90 minutes. And 95% business was impacted in those 90 minutes. And following with a cyber threat, with a ransom threat, I mean. And I will let you read the threatening email that they had received, and then we will move on to a question, the polling question. As you can see, these hackers can really send an intimidating email or the messages once they are in the game. All right, so the question really is, Jess, if you can please put that question on the screen, is if you were the decision maker and were in similar situation, what would have you done after seeing that message in your business? All right, so I think we'll end the poll, basically, which says 75% of you won't pay the ransom and 25% of you said pay the ransom. Well, let me tell you one thing. No doubt it's a difficult situation to be in, but largely the answer really depends on one thing, and that's, let me stop the results. The The answer really depends on one thing, and that is your business resilience plans and how well were you equipped to deal with a disaster like this? Were your teams trained enough to restore business functions instead of running in different directions? Were there proper communication plans to inform your clients, the stakeholders, and authorities where needed? In any case, choosing between paying or not paying a ransom, our advice has been very consistent, and that is what exactly the 75% has selected, not to pay ransom. Why? Because as paying ransom is no contractual obligation for hackers to return you the keys to restore your business. They may just disappear after receiving the ransom, leaving you in lurch. So in the given case, the business suffered drastically, having complete shutdown of their manufacturing plant, order processing, shipping, finance, and worst, they lost their call center and the ability to answer client queries. Clients were left with confusions about the disruption, which created panic, and soon enough, the negative news trended in social media. We live in a digital world, and this happens pretty often now, which is pretty bad for a business reputation, right? Well, 1 week later, business was still being restored, and millions were lost due to business disruption. Such a disaster event took place because they had a weak security program and poor business resilience planning in place. If we talk about financial losses, some of the financial losses that can quickly build up in such situations are obviously the legal costs, business interruption, which can be massive. With business interruption can create massive losses. Yeah, cost to repair systems, cost to restore data, government penalties, or even resulting damages. And it's not hypothetical when you hear about a cyber attack and resulting damages like fire or damaged equipments, because the moment hackers have a control of your business, especially in the manufacturing plants, they can manipulate a lot of things. The long lasting, in addition to financial losses, cyber attacks can damage the business reputation badly. That's a very bad news, by the way, for any business. Or even dropped market share, missed growth opportunities, shaken clients' confidence. Such impacts can be long lasting and sometimes irreparable and non insurable in most cases. So let's move on to a different polling question. What do you think? How long do you think a business will take to win their clients' confidence? Jess, I think it's a previous question. All right. So this is the correct question. Go ahead and please select the answers and we will be right back onto it. All right. So I hope everybody has responded, and 72%, 71% basically selects longer period. And the rest who said 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, I hope that you definitely have a plan to win back the client's confidence, right? Well, in this case, there is no right or wrong answer. But in my pure opinion, like majority of you said, it's certainly difficult to predict. It may take years to win back the client's confidence after such a disastrous event. Often we are asked which industries are really impacted. It really doesn't matter. You can be a government agency, energy, in the energy sectors, banking, hotels, retailers, mining. The thing is, if your business is connected to the outside world and internet, there is a cyber risk involved and potential for cyber losses. Actually, no one is immune. But the good news is, this is what we believe as a company. The majority of losses is preventable. Cyber is no different, provided you understand the risk. Yeah. So let's look through the lens of property, because a lot of people, you understand the property and fire, and also understand the fire hazard very well. We know that prompt fire detection is very beneficial. We also know that properties need to have adequate fire protection in place for maintaining the business continuity and avoiding physical damages due to fire. And when that fire event does happen, it is essential that you're prepared to respond quickly and efficiently. If you don't, it can really damage the business badly, correct? Now, looking through the perspective of cyber, it's not that different either. Yes, the hazard wears a hooded sweatshirt, but with the same potential of impact of physical damage and business interruption like fire, or even more, because cyber fire can just destroy a location. Cyber could potentially go boundaryless. So we need to detect the hacker, which is the hazard in this case, as early as possible, as quickly as possible. Once they are detected, we must protect our business from the cyber criminal to damage it any further. And we have to be prepared to respond and recover from such an attack. So you might say, hang on a minute, you shared an example. Could losses from such cyber attack be prevented? Then let's do one thing. Let's recap what happened in the example that I have just presented. So what happened was Michelle was definitely tricked to download an attachment. And what she did was infected her laptop with a malware resultantly. And hackers stole admin credentials. And that's what their strategy is most of the times. And then they spreaded the malware with giving one choice, either pay ransom or suffer the losses. Pretty brutal, isn't it? So can the losses be prevented from such a thing? Let's go through it. Let's say if Michelle was well trained as part of the business employee training program, she might have paused for a second and said, hang on a minute, would this be a phishing attack? I'm not sure. So why not I send it to the security team before I download the attachment? That little thinking could have saved business millions of dollars. But even after employee training, we all understand we can still make a mistake, right? So what happened next? The moment Michelle made a mistake, the malware had infected her device. Factually, every device should be protected with a enterprise-wide endpoint security program. And I'm not going to go into the details of it because we have the risk managers, and so I'm trying to keep it simple. So that basically the endpoint security should have contained the malware. And there are other procedures that can be deployed which could have informed and detected such a malicious attack and have informed the security team appropriately. Guess what? They were working, but not to the expectation that it should. So the second step also failed. And hacker were break into the administrator account. Well, if administrator accounts are protected just with passwords, which we all know is the weakest form of protection, then obviously you are putting your business at the risk. Technically, there should have been a multi-factor authentication in place. What does that mean is even if hackers break into the password, they should not still be granted access because there is a second level of authentication needed. And that failed as well in this business, and the malware spread, and in 90 minutes the entire business was shut down. That tells us one more thing, that there was a problem with the network segmentation. So look at these weaknesses which has literally caused the business to shut down. So could losses from such cyber attack be prevented? Absolutely yes. If these weaknesses were identified prior to the attack, the losses could have been prevented. Loss prevention is all about assessing the risk. And that's where the importance of risk assessment comes in, which can provide you the weaknesses and gaps in your security program to defend against and to recover from such cyber attacks. Such assessments can provide you and your management important information and actionable steps to mitigate the risk and prevent losses. See, assessing the risk can be done in multiple ways, and our advice is to perform an enterprise risk assessment that suits you so you can identify the gaps. I think the key point here is identify the gaps in your security program as a risk manager, as a business. The moment you identify those gaps, you can mitigate these gaps to improvise your cybersecurity posture. And this can be done in multiple ways, right? But today, just to give you an example how we do it, I'm going to hand it over to Christian Walsh, who's the FM Global Cyber Champion for Australia, who's going to walk you through the 3 components that we use for our clients and assess their risk. Over to you, Christian.
Thanks, Pankaj, and welcome to the session, everybody. As you said earlier, nobody is immune from cyber attack, the majority of which can be prevented by being properly prepared. By identifying where cyber exposures may exist, businesses can prevent themselves becoming victims like the real-life example that you just went through. Managing cyber risk can be done in a variety of ways. To help companies understand their cyber resilience, we developed a 360-degree holistic approach to cyber risk assessment. This approach consists of 3 engineering components. They are 1, physical security, 2, information security, and 3, industrial control systems. Combining these components will provide a comprehensive view of an organization's cyber risk. Physical security is the first line of defense and often a second thought when it comes to cybersecurity. Some of the measures that you should review as part of assessing your physical security risk include: are server and computer rooms locked with only appropriate personnel granted access? Do you have monitoring systems such as CCTV? Who has access to your critical business areas like server and data rooms and motor control centers? What security is in place for contractors, visitors, and third parties? And do you have an incident response plan for your sites to follow in case of an incident? Jess, would you mind putting up the poll question for me, please? Thank you. The second area is assessing our enterprise-wide information security environment. We've all heard the term information security, but what does it really mean? Just take a couple of seconds to pick which of these responses you think best describes information security. I can see a definite trend, and you are in fact right. Could we just stop the poll, Jess? Because each of those responses can actually be used to describe information security. So I guess the most correct answer would be D, all of the above. To protect your company's information, you must ensure you have a security program as well as appropriate processes, tools, and policies in place to protect your business from cyber threats. Most importantly, the security program must be well governed with top-level management support. Manage your cyber risk not only from external actors, but also manage, detect, and mitigate internal threats to your organization. You should ensure that you have appropriate information security controls like DMZ or demilitarized zone, multi-factor authentication, advanced malware protection, and network segmentation, all protecting your business from cyber threats. But even with the best protection in place, you can never guarantee you won't fall victim to a cyber attack. So last but not least, ensure you have response and recovery plans to be able to respond to a cyber incident in a timely and organized fashion. This will help minimize the time needed to return to normal business operations. The third and final aspect of the cyber risk assessment is industrial control systems, or ICS. You can think of ICS as the connection between the digital and physical worlds. This could be anything from a building management system to a complex manufacturing process. For operational efficiency, businesses depend on digital systems to control their physical processes. It is therefore vitally important to have a resilient ICS infrastructure in place. Although internet connectivity has brought many benefits, it's also led to increased cyber risk and greater potential for extensive physical damage. An ICS risk assessment should examine risks that could expose critical systems and equipment to malicious actions. Think cyber criminals taking control of physical equipment and machinery. To prevent this, you should have a strong understanding of your overall systems, connectivity, and interdependencies. Ensure you have sufficient network safeguards and strong firewalls in place. And don't forget, humans are amongst the weakest links. You should ensure that you have appropriate training programs in place for your employees and contractors. Also, emergency operating procedures should be available to deal with cyber incidents. Be sure to establish roles and responsibilities, including who is responsible for communication inside and outside the company. Which of your vendors are contractually obligated to provide support during a cyber event? In summary, assessing each of these individual components of the cyber risk assessment will give you a full and comprehensive view of your cyber resilience. By combining all three aspects of cyber risk, you can ensure your organisation is best placed to understand and mitigate its cyber risk. I'll now hand back to Pankaj to summarise and conclude the session. Over to you, Pankaj.
Thanks, Christian. See, ultimately, cyber resilience is a choice. One of our choices, of course, having a false sense of security or being complacent that it won't happen to you, and have limited investment in cybersecurity, which can lead to expensive restoration after an attack impacting global networks and operations, weeks of business disruption like we have seen in the example today, and have other severe losses like bad business reputation, low clients' confidence in your business. Or other choice is really to understand the risk well and proactively invest in a security program, prioritize security controls. So when, let's say, if a cyber attack do take place in an unfortunate event, you are able to promptly restore your business, have a minimum impact on your business with minimized downtime and restoration cost. See, knowing your cyber risk earlier and mitigating it by building a resilient business is the most cost-effective method to defend against severe losses. Cyber resilience is a choice that should be made before the attack and not after. And that's all we have to share. And we are now open for any questions that we have received. Sorry that we didn't attend while we were going through the presentation, but now the floor is open for the questions, and go ahead and fire, and we will see if we can answer all of them.
Pankaj, I can see there is one question in the Q&A section. Do you want to have a look there, or can you see it?
Yes, so if you only had time to focus one thing in the first instance as a part of the rollout of a cyber response plan, what would that be? Well, okay, so the question really is, if you really have to do And let me understand the question. If you had the time to focus on one thing in the first instance as part of the rollout of a cyber risk response plan, what would that be? Employee risk awareness and training. It could be anything, right? Okay, so let me just cover that question in a holistic way. Let's say if you have just one thing to deploy, I would look at what are the gaps existing in a business. So the moment I look at 10 gaps after performing the cyber risk assessment, then I would prioritize which one is the most severe and can damage the business badly, and which one is the cost factor. So this really goes into a detail of mitigation. So first step is identify the gaps, prioritize what is the most important thing, and then apply those gaps based on the business priorities. There is no right or wrong answer here. I can have a one-to-one discussion on that separately, but my answer would be identify the gaps and prioritize them accordingly. So all right, so it's pretty much, okay, that's done. Thank you for the presentation. How have you seen cybersecurity changing as a result of pandemic and the move to remote working? Excellent, okay. So what is happening is, as you all know, phishing is the primary mechanism or a method that hackers use to penetrate in a business. And phishing basically plays with our emotions. Human is the weakest element. What best situation would be other than COVID, where there is already a fear of pandemic? So they are leveraging the fear of pandemic, sharing the information that is so relevant for the current time and letting people access it, especially when most of the people are working from home. They are even finding open gates in manufacturing plants, for example, where now these manufacturing plants in rush opening their networks for their vendors, because they want their machinery to be fixed at the right time at the right place. So there is a possibility of penetrating in the manufacturing or the sensitive area of business. And the moment you deploy that, and if they are not secured, that creates a potential problem for the business. I hope that answers that question. And the Bob is, what is the estimated cost to establish a cybersecurity program and maintain it, including initial assessment followed by building the infrastructure? Wow. Okay. So that's very difficult to answer, Bob. It goes, and why it's difficult to answer is because we don't know how big that environment is. It has to be assessed from a perspective of, first of all, the nature of the business. What type of inherent risk that you carry as a business really depends on, are you a financial institution? What are the legal liabilities that can pose onto the business? So what is the nature of the business really has to be understood, so that we can decide whether the most fancy controls are needed or the least fancy controls are needed, or somewhere in the middle is needed. So it really depends on the business, the type of business, the industry you are in, and how large it is, where are the locations of this business, and how serious is the management, what sort of a budget you have. So all of that has to be combined, understood, and then somebody would be able to advise you that how it should be, the cost to build a cybersecurity program. All right, so are you seeing a change in the way ransoms are being paid? That is the type of cryptocurrency. Yes, the cryptocurrency, we are definitely seeing the change. Bitcoins is the key, but there is a variation of cryptocurrencies that are being used and asked because of anonymity of the currencies that they feel comfortable and the money they can manage. It really depends on the hacker and how they would like to extract that money and still stay anonymous. So yeah, is there a trend? I don't think so. But yes, it could differ from one hacker to another, in my pure opinion. All right, so the next question is, thanks for the presentation. FM Global is well known for its risk control standards. To what extent are these similar standards for cyber? In the terms of insurance products, is FM Global looking to provide proper cyber insurance in future? All right, so Yen, we definitely have cyber insurance, but I'm not an insurance expert. Basically, I'm a risk consultant. I manage the risk, so I'm very sorry that I won't be able to advise you anything on the cyber insurance, but definitely we can connect you with the right people. If you flick us an email, and account manager or underwriter will be in a better position to answer that question. So Carrie is a follow-up question. Have you ever, all right, so have you ever been unable to pay a ransom because it is uninsurable at law? As far as this is an insurance question, again, all right, so again, this is my opinion. I could be very wrong here, but I do not think the ransom can be uninsurable, because I have overheard a conversation pretty recently in which the client was asked a ransom, and their cyber policy, which was not our cyber policy, in the context I'm talking about, that policy allowed them to pay the ransom, and that will be covered. But the client decision was they're not going to encourage any financial transactions, especially because it's a ransom, and there could be legal liabilities, or there could be 100 other things that management do not want to get inside into it. And they decided not to pay the ransom, but factually, despite it was claimable from the insurer, they decided not to pay the ransom and move on with the recovery. I hope I answered that, Kerry, but sorry, I really don't know that, the uninsurable thingy for the ransoms here. All right, so the next question is, thank you for your presentation. Are you please able to share your views on any key takeaways, learnings from the toll and or line major cyber incidents? All right, so I guess my advice or our advice has been pretty straightforward, like you have seen in the presentation today. First, every business is at risk. If you understand that, then you must understand you need to identify the gaps in your security program. Security is not a product. It's a program, and it's a culture. And it's a big thing to assess a risk. If you do not assess the risk well, then you wouldn't have any idea in a complex business like toll or line that where actually the gaps are existing. The moment you fail to understand, guess what? You can't really mitigate them. So be it toll, line, or any business, our advice is pretty standard. Understand your business well, understand your threats well, who will be interested in bringing your business down, and that really depends on the nature of the business. Perform a risk assessment that you trust, and risk assessment that can give you the true picture, because it can go very complicated in assessing the risk if you pick the wrong one. If you pick the right one, and if you have a standard, you identify the gaps, fix them, trust me, you will be all right. This is an established principle in the industry. All right, so we'll move on to the next question, which is, Simon, in your experience, how mature do you think Australian manufacturing business are recognizing cyber risk resilience, perhaps on the NIST scale? Short answer is weak. I'm hesitant saying very weak because in last 6 months to 1 year, we are seeing that manufacturers have understood that hackers know that manufacturers are one of the weakest ones to hack. And why? Because manufacturing business is supposed to manufacture something. They are not very technology savvy. And the risk of cyber in manufacturing is completely different. Why do I say that? Is because they have industrial control systems, which can be as old as like decades. Fixing manufacturing plants needs an art. It basically needs a skill set to improvise it. It needs a strategy. And this is something hackers deeply understand. And hence they target manufacturing very badly, because they know once they cripple the manufacturing, they can ask for a big ransom payout. And exactly the example I went through. 90 minutes, 95% business was impacted. That as a cyber consultant, I clearly see it's a signal of a weak cybersecurity program. Are manufacturing business weak in Australia? The answer is yes. All right, so
I might just
Thanks,
add,
Mantu.
while you read the
Yeah,
next
sure,
question,
Christian.
Pankaj,
Yeah.
I'll add a little bit to Simon's question. It does also vary on what industry you're in. So overall, Pankaj is obviously right to say that it's weak. But what we find is that for those companies that are further down their resilience journey, they've got a team to manage it, and they look at things like the NIST framework, and they invest the resources. Then those sorts of companies are much better placed than others that might only have one person that's heard of NIST but hasn't had a chance to really look at their cybersecurity programs. They're aware that they're a target, but they just don't have the resources to go about making themselves as resilient as possible. So although it's weak overall, there are some companies that are actually a lot further along the path than others.
Thanks, Christian. And
Back
I
to
think,
you,
yeah,
Pankaj.
that's absolutely true. Yep. All right. So the next question is, how does Australian cyber-related regulations laws compare to other countries? Are we keeping up globally? Well, I would say yes. Actually, it really depends. Cyber law is not, again, one thing. Cyber law spreads across different industries like critical infrastructure. For example, when you talk about power generation, you talk about transportation, where the entire country depends. There are regulations which are strengthening in almost every country. Almost every country. So it's very difficult to compare Australia against which is currently being enhanced. And a lot of the time which I see is, especially for the critical infrastructure, because that's where the nation state happens, and they are very powerful the hacks that can really cripple important part of a country. That's where most of the countries are spending their time to bring up the laws. But if you talk about cyber laws in terms of bringing these criminals to the court of law so that they can be punished, it really varies. It really varies, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to capture these criminals because your jurisdiction really changes. In Australia, you may have the certain laws to prosecute somebody, but guess what? They're only applicable to Australia. And generally, these hackers, as you all know, they don't hack from the same country. In most of the hacks, they basically use a different country where cyber laws are weak. They are very smart criminals. They are white-collared criminals. When they hack, they certainly understand how they can be implemented in terms of law. So they purposefully pick a country where they cannot be arrested so quickly. And not only that, they also use multiple hops so that when an investigation company is initiated by a court of law, they find very hard time reaching to the source of the attack and hence grabbing these people. I hope I answered that question as well. The next one is, enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. How do you complement resourcing of cybersecurity with spend on cyber risk insurance? Wow, okay. See, there are two things that you have to understand here. The first thing is managing the risk well so that it doesn't happen. Because once it happens, it can really cause a serious damages beyond what you have insured. And that's why at FM Global, we not only insure our clients, but we also manage the risk so that they are protected from both the angles. One, from a prevention of cyber attack and prevention of cyber losses. And second, if let's say if it still happens because there is still a possibility, then they are covered from the insurance. And that's how we think is the best way to do it. Deploy the control which are necessary so that it doesn't happen, and then have an insurance covered so that you have some form of insurance for covering the business interruption, especially because that would be a huge, the dollar tag on the loss, business interruption, or resulting damage. For example, if a building catches a fire, oh my God, that could be a huge loss. So you got to balance them out, but both are important. All right, so the next question is, Carrie, understand that most cyber policies include a bodily injury and property damage exclusions with right back for privacy breach, with many insurers applying for cyber exclusions, removing silent cyber following the London market changes, do you expect that cyber liability will evolve to cover property damage and bodily injury caused by cyber incident? All right, I am very sorry, Kerry, because I am not an underwriter, like I mentioned. I am a risk consultant. I will not be able to answer that. But if you flick us an email again, we will definitely connect you with the right people. I know the answer, but I do not want to give you a vague answer here, but I'll connect you with the underwriter or the account manager in the team, and they will definitely be able to help you out there. Sorry about that.
I might just comment quickly on that
sure.
one.
Yeah,
Encourage, because I think I generally do agree that that's the way it will go. Obviously, the premium will need to be there to handle that. But for example, some policies do look at covering resultant damage, which is why there's a real push, particularly at FM Global, for example, on understanding that industrial control systems aspect, where a cyber criminal can get in, take control of the physical equipment and cause physical damage. So although the cyber limit, the cyber policy may be limited, some people do look at covering the resultant damage, and I guess depending on the profitability of that, then others may look to go down that track. And of course, FM Global doesn't look at life safety, but other carriers do. And so when you talk about bodily injury, if there's a market there for it and the premiums there for it, then I think it's fair to say that there could be a trend to go down that way.
Thank you so much, Christian, for saving me on that. All right, so the next one is, how should we address potential cyber risk exposures by third-party provider, for example, cloud-based services? All right, so cloud-based services, basically, you need to look at the SLAs and have more importantly, is you need to have your own security policies that you can basically map these SLAs and the securities they provide and see, does that fit with our business needs and business needs of security policies in terms of business protection? Ultimately, cyber risk is a business risk. It's not a technology issue anymore that how we perceived in the past. It's a business risk. So the moment you have those standards, the moment you have those policies, then you go to the third party and cloud-based services, for example, to map, does this meet our needs? And there could surely be the gaps, but you need to pick which is the most closest to your security policies. Only if you are comfortable with that, go for it. Otherwise, as a risk consultant, my advice is don't pick a cloud services just because you want one or any third-party vendor. All right, so what is the best framework for cybersecurity? Mix of a couple of them. You don't have to stick to one framework. You could basically pick combination of two, maybe NIST and ISO 27001. I am a fan of ISO 27000 series because it gives you quite actionable policies, standards, and procedures that you could literally use, and they are very useful. My choice is 27000 series of standards and policies. You can go with NIST or combination of both. Even NIST has pretty good standards that you might want to look into it. The last question, where do you think companies should seek security first, through management of internal processes or risk transfer? I think I have answered that already. The management of internal processes or risk transfer, I would say, if I had to really pick, I would say management of internal processes, because first of it, if you can reduce your exposure, if you can reduce the exposure itself, then you can easily prevent the losses and minimize your risk transfer cost. Let's say if I have a best security program, I'm very confident about it. I have limited locations, for example, and I know the exposure is really limited because I have deployed a multi-factor authentication. I do not have quite a lot of third parties who connect with it. And it really depends. That's what I mean. And the moment you do that judgment and assessment, then you can really take the step forward and say, okay, let's manage the internal processes or build up the security program well, and then do some risk transfer as well so that you can cover from both the perspective. All right. And that's about it, if there are any further questions.
Doesn't look like there are any more, Pankaj. So thank you, Pankaj and Christian, for working through all those issues for us, and thanks for everyone who has engaged in this session. We very much, from RIMS Australasia's perspective, appreciate the support of those who've registered for this session, and very much appreciate FM Global's support of RIMS in various forums and jurisdictions around the world. Thank you guys for that intelligently well-researched presentation. I want to remind attendees that of this session that the next session starts at 4:30 today, Cyber Trade-offs, Security versus Utility, with Dave Spence of Accenture, and that's sponsored by AXA XL. Attendees are welcome to attend that session, and any other sessions that they may not have registered for. Access link is the same as for this one. If anyone's interested in becoming a member of the Australasian chapter of RIMS, along with RIMS Global, please visit www.rims.org for further details. And we'd appreciate it if you'd complete the post-attendee survey and let us know any thoughts. So thank you, everyone. We'll close it there, and good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.